Lance Bailey. Thanks for joining me. We're a little biased here with the Hall of Fame finalists, or already having been announced, and who gets into the Hall of Fame will be in the next few days. And in the Philadelphia area, where we're both from, we have stronger opinions about one player than most, the one who's probably the most interesting this year as to whether he gets in on the first Hall of Fame, on the first Hall of Fame ballot he's on. We are talking, of course, about Terrell Owens, T.O., and you as a former quarterback and coach. Curious what you think.
To be honest with you, Adam, when you sent me that text a little while ago, my first reaction was no.
Uh-huh.
But then I got online and looked at his career, and I did not realize that he played 15 years in the NFL. Now I looked at his statistics, and he probably averaged over 13 yards a reception over those 15 years, and close to 1,000 yards, if not 1,000 yards, for those 15 years. So I quickly flip-flopped.
Yeah.
And within the last 15, 20 minutes, and I would say, yes, he's definitely.
Well, let me review. I'm at NFL.com, their article about it. And you just have to look at his career receiving categories. He's 6th all-time in catches, 2nd all-time in receiving yards behind only Jerry Rice, and 3rd all-time of touchdown receptions. So at a certain point, when you rank that high, how do you not get in? I mean, obviously.
I think when you just say those numbers right there, I think it's got to be a given.
Well, we have
again, Again, I didn't think it was 15 years that he played, so let's just look that up a few minutes ago.
Yeah, he came in, he played till he was in his late 30s, and, in football, unlike baseball, you pretty much always get in sometime between 21 and 23, 24. And, that's that. I mean, there's some, some people say some things about his characters, which are quickly addressed by two things. One, he never got in any trouble off the field, which is more than when you see guys like Warren Sapp and so many guys who've done worse in the Hall of Fame, that's the argument. He was a pain in the butt, but he's not the first wide receiver. And then when you say he was a little crazy, you almost say, well, no, he wasn't a little crazy. He was nuts. But that's also why he was perhaps the player that he was. I mean, the stories about him, I remember reading his autobiography. He'd get up in the middle of the night and work out in college. I mean, he was driven in a way nutty people sometimes are.
I agree. If you go back and look at what his life was like growing up, you can almost make an excuse for some of his behavior.
Yeah.
But off the field issues, he, like you said, he never was in trouble with the law. He never did things like that. He wasn't, caught with marijuana in the car or anything like that, which you would with what you see with today's athletes, that seems to be prevalent.
Yeah.
When you look at that whole thing and look at his statistics, why shouldn't he be inducted?
And the interesting character issue is there's another receiver who was quiet, you never heard about anything on the field, who's the other leading wide receiver candidate to get in. That's finalist Marvin Harrison. And he has a bigger character problem. I think he was involved in someone getting shot, and was it killed too?
Right, yeah, he was investigated for a murder in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Yep, and Terrell Owens never had that issue.
Yeah. The other thing with T.O., I'm thinking the childhood bringing up, the way his childhood's brought up, the way he found out who his sister was. Do you know that story?
Pardon me, Adam?
Do you know the story about how he figured out who his sister was?
No, I did not hear that story.
Oh, this will traumatize anyone. When he was like 11 or 12, he started flirting with some girl down the street, and his mom said, "Terrell, you can't talk to that girl that way." "Why not, Mom?"
Really?
"Because it's your sister." That's how we found out who his father was.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
So
that's going to have a profound effect on him.
yeah, that'll give a little bit to anyone that way.
Right. He may have been a locker room issue from time to time.
Oh, clearly he was.
But in Philadelphia, he was. I think he was locker room issue at the end. But I'm not so sure that Donovan McNabb didn't throw gas on that fire to escalate that whole thing as well.
Well, my feeling on that is the players knew Owens was odd, but it was McNabb whom they didn't like. And you and I have been around Philly, South Jersey enough.
Right.
They really didn't like McNabb. I mean, he was great at, working the white guys in the media, but for the most part, the black guys in the locker room didn't like him. And I think a lot of it may have just been at a certain point you have to measure up. as Bill Simmons once wrote, T.O. was dealing with a broken ankle, got himself ready to play in the Super Bowl, had a phenomenal game after living in an oxygen chamber, and who knows what McNabb was doing. I heard he was partying the Super Bowl week. He wasn't in a condition to play in the fourth quarter, and that cost him the Super Bowl. And that probably entered into T.O.'s mind why he deserves more money that year.
I agree 100%. I think that Donovan had the media in Philadelphia snowball. I don't know whether he had the majority of the fans snowball because there was always those critics. But within the locker room, I think there was more supporters for T.O. than there was McNabb, and that to this day is leaked when this conversation is talked about. How much support he actually had in the locker room versus McNabb.
And of course, we have the issue in the last few weeks, months, or this last year in Philly, that McNabb was always the good guy and Owens was the troublemaker. But of course, McNabb just spent a little bit of time in jail for DUI.
So yeah, and what is this, his second or third DUI that he just had? And Terrell has never been arrested, as far as I know.
And I don't get why a guy who makes as much money as McNabb has over the course of over his career would ever be caught for DUI. You hire a driver. I mean, you have Uber. There's no excuse for DUI.
There's no excuse.
You might get in a fight with your girlfriend, but when you have that much money,
When it comes to that, there's absolutely no excuse. And for the reasons you said, the money that they make, you pay someone to take you where you need to go.
Yeah. I mean, you can get in a fight with your girlfriend. I understand that can happen. It's heat of the moment. But there's no reason McNabb ever to have to drive himself after he's had a drink. Period.
No.
Or three.
None whatsoever. I mean, he's made enough money in the NFL. He's making a good salary with the NFL Network at the time.
True.
And he's got his pension. There's no need for that.
Must be nice.
Circling back, we haven't had this issue with Terrell.
No, I don't think he drinks, by the way. I don't think he's ever drank in his life.
I agree with you. I don't think he does either.
Yeah, so I remember him hearing that in his book, that he never had a drink. And, certainly when he was a player, he was so concerned with the condition of his body, it would make sense. I don't know if he's relaxed a little bit about that in recent years, but he's clearly never been busted for DUI. I'm at the NFL.com website, and it's listing the top players who are the finalists, and I'm wondering if you have some opinions on them and coaches. I don't think we even need to discuss Brett Favre. It'll probably be a situation like Ken Griffey Jr. with baseball. Who the hell is the person who didn't vote for him?
Right, exactly.
Not worth discussing.
Whoever didn't vote for him was just someone who just didn't like him.
Yeah, that's true. But as a person,
I don't know how you can't like him as a football player at any point during his career.
Oh, who didn't like Ken Griffey Jr.? I mean, someone didn't vote for him.
Right. That person, I don't know whether that's public knowledge or not, who did and didn't vote for him, but...
Right. Well, he's still got the highest total of anyone ever, so I'm sure he will be fine. They're mentioning the other top candidates. The first one that they list is, we talked about Marvin Harrison already a little bit, who's just sort of in the shadow of T.O. a little bit. But they mentioned Tony Dungy, also, who did a lot of his work with the Colts, but also that Tampa Bay defense that John Gruden eventually won. I've heard mixed things about him. People say Peyton Manning ran that, and he's just not that smart. And I don't think he's a very great commentator. I just don't see the genius with him, but they won. What do you think about Tony Dungy getting in?
Pardon me, can you repeat that, Adam? I had a little...
Oh, I'm sorry. Tony Dungy. What do you think about his candidacy?
Tony Dungy should be in there, Adam. No questions asked.
Okay.
I don't think that's what he did in Indianapolis, what he did in Tampa, what he's done for the game, his character and so forth. There's no question whatsoever that Tony Dungy deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
Okay. Just asking. Okay, then we have a couple Rams that they list as the top candidate. I guess the LA Rams now. Kevin Green, Orlando Pace, and Kurt Warner.
I don't know. I think Orlando Pace, yes. Orlando Pace, I don't know how long exactly what his career was, but I know it had to be 10, 12 years at least. And to play left tackle in the NFL for as long as he did, at the level that he did, I don't think there's one question that Leonard Pace needs to be in there. Kevin Green, debatable as far as I'm concerned. He was a 3-4 outside linebacker who put up decent numbers, but did he put up decent numbers for the extended time that he needed to be inducted?
Right.
I would leave that to the question. And Kurt Warner as well. He put up decent numbers. He won 1 Super Bowl. But again, did he play, off the top of my head, did he play 12, 14 years like Brett Favre?
Well, clearly not.
Peyton Manning did. No. So I don't know whether his numbers are going to stack up to the other guys that are going to get in and that are in.
Well, they don't. I mean, but he was spectacular those couple of years that he was spectacular. It's almost like a Sandy Koufax analogy in baseball,
Right. But we can all be spectacular for a period of time. Does that mean we all should be inducted into a certain Hall of Fame or not?
Well, there are very few examples you can come up with like that.
Right.
Where a guy leads his team out of nowhere. I mean, you can't come up with too many examples, except for in the running back area. And we'll get to Terrell Davis. We talked about Terrell Owens, but we'll talk about Terrell Davis. Actually, they have him as stock rising along with Don Coryell.
I think Don Coryell would be a guy who changed the game.
Right.
And when you and I were growing up, I look at him as it was the Dan Fouts, and I guess Jefferson was the wide receiver. Kevin Winslow, he kind of changed the game a little bit with
right.
his the way his mind was toward offensive football.
Right.
As an innovator, I would think that could be a little bit more. That carries for me as a former coach. That carries a little more than someone who was a flash in the pan for 4, 5, 6 years. Who doesn't have the 12, 14-year pedigree that someone like Orlando Pace has or Terrell Owens has to get in the Hall of Fame.
How about Terrell?
If you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, the Chargers were definitely fun. It's just he never got to the Super Bowl. How many coaches?
No, he never got to the Super Bowl, but look at the numbers that those guys put up. I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not sure. Is Kellen Winslow in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, yeah. Kellen Winslow has to be.
Kellen Winslow's in the Hall of Fame.
I think so.
Dan Fouts?
Oh, yeah. Fouts certainly is.
Dan Fouts. So, to me, that alone, they're in the Hall of Fame because of how he called and how he constructed an offensive game plan for the years that he was in San Diego.
So you think Fouts might not have been the star he was, and Winslow might not have been, had it not been for the way he constructed it. It's not like an Adrian Peter.
You know what? I'm not. I can't say that to be certain, but I can say that him being there did help. It helped their numbers. Yes,
certainly.
Absolutely. I mean, there wasn't any teams in the NFL at that point throwing the ball 45, 50 times a game as well as they were.
Right. How about Terrell Davis, who is similar in ways to Warner, that he had a short career. Obviously, that happens a lot more with running backs than it does with quarterbacks, and he didn't have up and down like Warner did. He was all the way.
I think with Terrell Davis, I think you got to treat him a lot like Kurt Warner. Did he have the longevity? No. Did he have the numbers over a short period of time? Yes. But to me, the longevity's got to weigh out in the end for me. Because it is the Hall of Fame when you think about it.
But is that fair to running backs?
What's that?
Is that fair to running backs who have such short careers to begin with?
I think it is because you look back, when you and I were growing up, and those running backs were playing, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years in the NFL. It hasn't been to the last 7 or 8 years that, the running back position has been devalued, Maybe that will change how they get in the future, but I think, Terrell Davis played at an era where there were still running backs that were featured backs well into the 30s.
By the way, Lance, I have to disagree with you. I mean, yeah, Dorsett was great, but the running back, we're the same age. We're both 44 or 45 right now. And so the early 70s were our formative years. And the one running back who stood out as the beast in that era, never got to the Super Bowl, had a pretty short career, but he was the running back at that time. You know who I'm talking about. He can barely walk now.
Well, you've got me because I'm trying to blank.
Earl Campbell.
Earl Campbell, yes.
He was the best, but he didn't do it for very long, probably because they ran him 35 times a game a lot of the time. Bum Phillips.
No, I completely agree because of the style that he ran. Now, Earl Campbell's in the Hall of Fame, correct?
Well, of course.
Right. Which I will then back off of my statement a little bit. To an extent, the fact that he's in there opens the door for someone like Terrell Davis to be in there. Not that I agree with it, but that door then is open for someone like him. My personal opinion, I think you got to do it for a longer period of time in order to gain that.
Even if the 2 Super Bowls are there.
Yeah, because what were Montgomery for the Eagles? What did he have? 5 or 6 years? If I don't even think he had that.
Right.
4 or 5 years of greatness. Now, if they would have won the '80 Super Bowl, is Walt Montgomery Hall of Fame material?
I've never even heard anyone consider it.
I don't agree with that. So if you win the Super Bowl and just because you're on that roster and you put 2 or 3 good years up, does that make you eligible for the Hall of Fame? I don't agree with that.
Well, let me ask you about a player who may have played his last game, who's a clear fan favorite and one of the most fun guys to watch. Marshawn Lynch won Super Bowl, but he's had 2 of the greatest runs in NFL history that people come to. He's colorful, and they think of him as a clutch playoff performer, but apparently he only has 91.7 rushing yards per game, while Terrell Davis's career average is 142.5. I think Lynch has played more years, but what will you say about Lynch going to the Hall of Fame, assuming he's done and doesn't have another great year in him?
Well, how many years does he have versus Terrell Davis?
I think
would be my question.
I don't remember. Davis really was only 4 or 5. I think Lynch has been in the league. I mean, he's been a star since he was with the Bills. 2-3 years, and then it was 9 where he had the Beastquake. So he's been with the Seahawks now 7 years, and I think he's been in the league 9.
9. Yeah, so to me, you're pushing. If he's effective for another year or 2, then I would say. In my opinion, then he's earned that right. Mm-hmm. I don't think Terrell Davis played 9 years, just off the top of my head. I could be wrong,
right?
But I don't think he did.
And
I look at the longevity versus that. To me, that weighs a lot more for me than it does just putting numbers up over a brief period of time.
Clearly, and the one Lynch Super Bowl that they won. It was a blowout, and
exactly.
And you could have gotten rid of anyone on that offense. Seattle's defense dominated that whole game. Okay, in the we will be there soon category, it has 3 guys. The first is very interesting. None of them are at the most prominent positions. Morton Anderson.
See, I think Morton Anderson deserves to be in there. He did it for a long time. It was effective for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, arguably the best kicker in history until Adam Vinatieri comes in, who will be a no-brainer for the Hall of Fame.
I think it's an absolute no-brainer.
Vinatieri, so why not put Anderson in? So, because I can't see anyone else getting in there before Vinatieri unless Anderson becomes the first kicker. And of course, for people listening, Ray Guy is now in the Hall of Fame, and kickers are arguably more prominent than punters.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's an absolute no-brainer that Morton Anderson deserves to be there, and hopefully will be there.
How about Alan Faneca, a 6-time first-team All-Pro at guard for the Steelers?
You say that after you say those numbers, the 6-time All-Pro.
Yeah.
To me, that's you're adding longevity. You're adding top of his game for at least 6 years. He was probably his top of his game for even longer than that. I say he deserves to be in there. First team,
yeah. And, I mean, with offensive linemen, there's an element that it's a little bit more based on reputation, so it's not quite the accomplishment of being there as quarterback where there's statistics you can more easily measure. But it's hard to win. And then the final one, and the will be there soon, is John Lynch, Buccaneer safety, and I think he played for the Broncos at the end.
Yes, he did. I think, how many, I'm up to date on, I'm not so much up to date on John Lynch's statistics. He played for a long time.
Yeah.
He was effective for a long time. He played on Super Bowl champion. which goes back to what I've been saying, longevity. And he did it over a long period of time, and he was effective. I don't have any problems putting John Lynch in the Hall of Fame whatsoever.
Right. And he would be joining two other Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive players.
Yep.
And Rondé Barber will probably certainly get in, but I think he has to wait a couple more years till he's eligible.
I agree. He needs to wait a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, I think he only retired in the last year or two. And then it has on the outside looking in Steve Atwater, Edgerrin James, who does not strike me as an All-Pro. As a Hall of Famer.
No, I agree with you.
Or Joe Jacoby from the Redskins.
Yeah, Jacoby played with the Washington Redskins. So he played. I think he played for a long period of time. So I would lean towards him. Steve Atwater had a lot of injuries when he was at the Denver Broncos over his career. The years he played versus games he played, I think, would be something to look at. But I don't look at Steve Atwater. When you say Steve Atwater, I don't look at him as a Hall of Famer whatsoever. If it's Joe Jacoby, I can remember him. With John Riggins and the Hogs, he was a stalwart for a number of years down in D.C. with the Redskins, and I think they won at least one, maybe two Super Bowls with him down there.
Yeah, I think it would have been the 87 season one and the 82 season. I don't think he was around for the 91. Oh, hold on, I'll look that up. Just looking, Steve Atwater, what years he was active. It was he was on the 97 and 98 champion teams for the Broncos, which really weren't because of their defense so much, it was more of the offense.
Right.
Joe Jacoby, I'm just looking up right now. How many was he on? He came in the league 81. No, he was on all three Washington Super Bowl teams.
Yeah.
93. So 3. And he's
and that's probably over a decade too, correct?
Yeah. And he's like the first guy you think of, like Russ Grimm and Mark May as the Hogs. And then finally, it mentions the old-timers who might get in. And Dick Stanfill, who was just before our time, I don't know much about him, one of the Lions.
No, I do not either.
And Ken Stabler is intriguing, the late Ken Stabler. He died in the last year. In fact, in the news this week because of the potential concussion issues that they're talking about, but no one can really prove. What's your thought on Stabler? Was he in the Bob Greasy category?
I think he's part of that era with John Madden and the Raiders of the 70s where they were so dominant and he was the quarterback of that team. But I don't know whether he threw up the numbers. He definitely won.
Well, remember LaMonica in the early 70s, Stabler was not their starting quarterback.
Right. So I think it goes back to, and I'm just saying this off the top of my head without looking at statistics and stuff, back to longevity. How long was he actually an effective quarterback in the NFL? Was it 10 years? That I'm not sure. If it's 5 or 6 years, then I have my doubts.
Yeah, well, he would have gotten in by now, and this probably would be the only year he's going to get in because he passed away in the last year. It's just, Greasy got in without necessarily being that great, but undefeated team, and it was 2 years in a row as opposed to 1 year winning the Super Bowl. In fact, the Raiders were only in the Super Bowl once in the 70s.
I agree. Yep.
As opposed to a Bradshaw, who won 4 Super Bowls. And I guess Tarkenton was in a lot of Super Bowls, never won it. For that era, and that was before the statistics really boomed. All right, finally, Lance, while I have you on, any predictions for the Super Bowl?
I think it's Carolina's to lose, to be honest with you. I think Denver's got to play a perfect game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think if they get behind, early, Peyton can bring them back. The Peyton from 10 years ago could, but the Peyton of this year and the last 3 or 4 years, I don't know if it's possible. I think Denver's defense absolutely has to play a spectacular game. They're capable of it. We've seen that.
They were the number one in football. They were the top defense in football.
But I think just watching Carolina, there's just something going on down there. There's some mojo going on that, we've all seen it in athletics. I don't know if that can be stopped at this point.
Right.
And, it's just my gut thinking it's Carolina. And my gut thinking, if Denver doesn't keep it close in the first quarter and a half, we could be looking at a blowout. That's just my gut.
Well, we'll see soon if they're like similar recent Mojo teams, which would be Seattle 2 years ago, which did bring it to the Super Bowl, but they could be like the 2007 Patriots at the same time and, get beaten by a team with a hot defense. We will see. Lance Bailey, thank you for joining me right now. I'm going to put this up on YouTube on one of my channels, and it's always good to talk to you.
No problem, man. I'll talk to you later.